Thank you so much, Joseph. Good morning, everyone. Again, this is Petra Hartness, one of the trainers for Matt. I've been with Matt for 3 years, and I probably have spoken to some of you out there in the field. But we decided to roll out the election judge payroll training, being that this is a year of elections. We felt that to bring process and information to all of you on how to do the payroll. And for some of you that have not done it, if you have questions, by all means, Joseph said, you can ask me at the end. But I'm hoping that this presentation will provide more guidance and information for you to assist you with your election judge payroll. Okay? Okay. First question, are election judges employees? We get this question quite a bit, and the answer is yes, okay? Your election judges are your employees. So who are these employees? Who can be an election judge? Okay, supervisors that are elected, your town board supervisors, your clerks, treasurers that are elected or appointed can be election judges. Your deputy clerk, treasurer, deputy treasurer can also be an election judge. And hired employees can also be election judges. Now, because they're your employees, the next slide we're going to discuss, as employees, what forms do you normally need for your employees? Okay. These forms, the federal W-4 form, the state W-4, your Minnesota new hire form, your I-9 form, and of course your para, your choice if you are eligible. Now, 2 years ago, the wage theft law came into place, so you also need to provide your employees the wage theft information. Now, all these forms are in a PDF form in the chat room, so we're briefly going to touch on them throughout the presentation, but not very much. Okay, so these are forms that you need when you have new employees. What forms do you need for election judges? What about election judges? What forms do you need to have these judges fill out for your township? So again, they are employees. You do need some paperwork for them. And it's not all the same. So what does that mean? It's not all the same. So these are the forms that you need for your election judges to submit to your township clerk or treasurer. You need your federal W-4 form. You need a state W-4 form. You do not need the Minnesota new hire. We suggest and highly recommend that you get an I-9 form from each election judge. They do not qualify for para, so you do not need to submit the membership to para. They do need the wage theft information. That has to be filed. So these forms need to be filed for each election judge that you have working in your township. So let's discuss briefly the wage theft employee notice. Again, you have a copy of this in your PDF file in your chat room. I suggest and highly recommend that you look at it and you review it. It's pretty simple. You just go and fill out each particular area. In the number 1 section, of course, the employee or the judge's name and address. In the section 2 area, it's the employer name and address, which is the township. The township name and address goes there. On the 3rd area, it's the employment status. And this is basically your judges are part-time, okay? In the 4 area, you're going to list their rate of pay. Now, the rate of pay differentiates from township to township. There are some townships that could pay $6, $10, $20 an hour to their judges. So make sure that you list that in the section 4 area. And also put in there if you're going to pay for their reimbursement for mileage to come to judges training, to come to the election, your township, if you're going to provide meals for them, any incidentals that you will provide for your judges should be provided in the section 4 area. Now your line 6 lists out what you can deduct. And then the line 7, very, very important. You're going to pay your judges within 30 to 31 days. Now, the wage theft law basically states that you are required to pay your judges within the 30 to 31 day timeline, okay? Now, the clerk maintains a copy of all this in the employee file, the clerk or the treasurer, depending on how your township is set up. Again, townships are different. So the important thing is for you to keep a copy of this in a file. So if you do get audited by the state of Minnesota, you have copies of this, okay? Now, I thought this was kind of cute, you know. We just, every now and then we like to interject something a little funny. So, okay, Chuck Norris, for some of you that don't know Chuck Norris, I'm sure most of you do, you know, he's a martial arts expert, but here he's an attorney and he's going to represent injured people. Now, is that a conflict of interest or is that a conflict of interest? So how can you represent somebody that in injuries when he's the one that's doing the injury onto the individual, okay? So we just thought that was kind of funny. Again, this presentation is a presentation that we put together to roll out at the spring training earlier this year. So some of these, I know the interaction is probably more effective when you do have a live audience, but I hope you enjoyed this. This is kind of cute. Okay, so what is a conflict of interest? Conflict of interest is the C6000 form. There again, you've been provided a copy of that in the PDF file. Now, who needs a C6000 and why do you need a C6000? C6000 is used for supervisors and treasurers that are performing the duty of an election judge. Again, supervisors and treasurers that are performing the duty of an election judge. There are townships out there that some of the supervisors are election judges for every election, and that's fine. But the requirements, the law is there has to be a C6000 paperwork filed for each episode. So for instance, the primary that's coming up, if a supervisor serves in that primary, you need the affidavit for the primary. If the person is participating in the presidential election this fall, you need an affidavit for that. So it's for each episode that you would need this paperwork. Now, let's back up a little bit, okay? The C6000 includes a resolution. Now, the resolution needs to be motioned and presented to your board. Your board has to provide the resolution for the C6000. Now, this is something that you can do yearly. You don't have to do this at each episode. It can be done once a year, okay? Now, the other parts of the C6000 is the affidavit. And this is the affidavit where you, as a supervisor or treasurer, needs to fill it out. And this is required for every timesheet, as I mentioned earlier, whether you're going to be doing the primary or the presidential, you need to go ahead and have this with every timesheet. So filling out your C6000 documents. Now, this can be a little bit overwhelming when you first take a look at it, but just like Chuck Norris says, you really do need to do this paperwork. Some of the townships go ahead and say, why do we have, I've had questions posed to me asking me, Petra, why do we need this document? We've never had to do this document. Well, we have needed it, but what's happened is that since townships have been audited, we're getting questions as to why these documents aren't filed. So please really do this paperwork. You need to have this for any supervisor or treasurer that's performing the duty of an election judge. So the resolution, this is basically the contract authorizing the interested officer to do this job. The board is saying, yes, supervisor, you can act as an election judge for those particular primary or the presidential election. Okay, so this is a resolution that has to be signed. Now, it also includes in this resolution what the supervisor or the treasurer is going to be doing. They're going to be acting in the capacity of an election judge. But we use the C6000, not to get you confused because this is election judge training, but if you're having one of the supervisors do your road graders, if you're having a supervisor or treasurer doing any type of duty that is not part of their duties as a supervisor or a treasurer, okay? Now, keeping in mind that the reason this form has to be filled out is because election judges, you can poll your residents and have somebody else be an election judge. Now, I know some of you are probably saying, but it's really difficult, Petra, to get election judges. We understand that. And so it's fine to have a supervisor or treasurer do this duty, but this paperwork has to be filled out. And this is basically, this whole resolution is how this relates to them, whether it's a supervisor, whether it's an employee, whether it's a treasurer, independent contractor. That's the resolution part of the C6000 that has to be filled out. So the affidavit is basically the interest of the claim. So this has to be submitted with every timesheet. Now remember, keeping in mind that you have to submit and you have to pay these election judges every 30 to 31 days. So at the 31 day, the timesheet for when a supervisor or treasurer submits their timesheet, this affidavit of official interest needs to be attached to it. Now, this affidavit is also signed, I believe, by the clerk, and it has to be notarized. Keep this with this timesheet just in case in the future your township would get audited. Very, very important. Okay, so here we're breaking down the affidavit and how it should be filled out and what you should include in the affidavit in full detail. It should have the dates and the activities when you completed it. For example, the August primary, you would put that particular date on there. This treasurer acted as an election judge in August, whatever the date is. It should include the total that they are going to be paid. So the amount should be in this affidavit that's attached to the timesheet. And basically, there should also be how this relates to them. Again, you would put here that, yes, I'm the treasurer and I am performing this duty as an election judge for this primary. Now, just to give you an example, in our township, we have, I believe we have 7 election judges, and we have added 2 more this year. But even though we have plenty of election judges for our primaries and for the presidential election coming up, you should always have a couple of extra just in case somebody gets ill or somebody's not able to make it. So all the supervisors and the treasurer, myself, and we are all trained as election judges. We've attended the election judge training, and we are just made available in case our clerk needs us. Okay. Payroll. This is not free money. Okay, what does that mean? Township is not required to withhold any taxes. We don't withhold federal taxes, state taxes, Medicare, Social Security, FICA, if it's less than 1,800. Now, having said all that, you see the last bullet point on this, number 7, the township may withhold if they're asked. You might have an election judge that tells you, you know what, Petra, I understand this, but that you don't have to take taxes out, but I would like to have taxes taken out. So when that individual asks you to do that, you can by all means do that. Just make sure that you try to get it in writing from them and have them sign it. Just in case the person later decides and asks you in the future, I don't want taxes taken out. Okay, because they can change their mind. So, okay, so handling election wages. Okay, the election judges, again, supervisors and treasurers that are in that capacity. Clerk or hired employee has an EJ. These are the election wages. Now, later on, we're going to go in full detail and go screen by screen so we can explain how the payroll is handled for election judges. Okay, now, in the earlier slide, we mentioned that your election judges are employees. They are your employees. This is the account distribution, the account coding that you should use for this. Okay, your election judges are employees, so you're taking the money out of your general fund, which is 100. The 41960 is election judges, other election for other than the clerk. Okay, you use the 41960. And then, of course, they're part-time, so you're going to use the coding 103. Now, this is what you're going to use when you're going to be paying your election judges. Now, remember, no taxes taken out, no conflict of interest, because this is not a supervisor or a treasurer or deputy treasurer, no withholding of any sort, and mileage. If you're going to pay for their mileage to and from their training, election judge training, or if you're going to pay their mileage to come to your township as an election judge on the days of the election, this is the coding you're going to use. Again, 100 is taken out of the general fund because they're your employees. You're going to use the 41960 because it's any employee other than the clerk. And the 331 is the mileage object code. Okay. Now, separate checks are used for mileage or any other reimbursement. So if you have an election judge that you've decided, yes, you are going to pay their mileage, when you pay them within the 30 to 31 days, you're going to issue them 2 checks. You're going to issue them 1 check has their duty as an election judge the day of the election, and you're going to issue them another check, a separate check for their mileage or other reimbursements. Now, the other reimbursements would be, say one of the election judges purchased 2 boxes of Dunkin' Donuts or something and wants to get reimbursed for that. They're going to provide you, the clerk or the treasurer, the receipt, and you're going to also add that onto the mileage claim sheet. This is a claim sheet, okay? You're going to add that on there because you're not going to take any taxes out of the mileage or the reimbursement that the election judge has paid for these donuts. You're going to give them the full amount. Okay, so supervisors and treasurers and election judges, okay. Again, you're going to obtain the C6000, and I'm sure you're probably thinking out there, why is she talking about the C6000 so much? And it's basically very, very important and crucial to the records of your township that you have a copy of this, okay? Now, you're going to use the override method of payroll, which we will be discussing, okay? And you're going to use that coding for your election judges. And you're going to use that coding for the mileage. Okay, this is for elected officials. Now, in the next slides, we're going to cover the actual override system, okay, on the CTAS program. Now, keeping in mind that this method only, as you can see the little stop sign here, only impacts the current check, only the payroll that you're working on, not the employee card. So please make sure that you add the election judge payroll separately and not change the employee card. Again, please do not change the employee card. When you change the employee card, you are changing the permanent record on your system, on the CTAS program, and you don't want to do that. You just want to go ahead and override this particular payroll. Now, you see on the lower left-hand side that I have added a little red asterisk stating that this override might look different with the 2020 CTAS update. And it does look different. So we don't want you to be alarmed when you take a look at it. This presentation, again, as I mentioned to you, we did this in February for the March spring training. So this was used with the 2019 CTAS program. So it might look slightly different. Don't get alarmed. If you follow these steps, you'll be just fine. Okay. Now, of course, when you go ahead and you're going to add a payroll, you're going to go to your payroll options. You're going to add a payroll. I go ahead and label mine election judge payroll. You're going to, of course, move those employees over to the right that you're going to want to pay that were election judges. Okay, and remember, this is only the election judge payroll. That's it. So those are the only people you're going to want to move over. Okay, so in the gross pay, you see here how on the lower left-hand side here, we've got election rate. We've got $6 and 6 hours, 6 hours. We're paying our election judges in this township. We're going to pay John Johnson $15 an hour for his election judge duty. Okay, so 15 times 6 is $90. Okay, so you're going to want to add that in there. Now you're going to want to go to the next screen, the taxes. Okay, now you see on the taxes, the calculate tax was checked. You're going to want to click on that. And when you click on that, you're going to uncheck that. Okay, when you uncheck this, it's all going to be zeroed. It should all be 0. Now, and you will see this displayed more in the next screen, but I just wanted to show you that this is where you're going to go ahead and unclick the calculate tax. Okay, because you can see on the screen there, the FICA for John, we are taking out FICA, we're taking out Medicare. Okay, but once you unclick that calculate tax box, then you go to the next screen, and this is what it's going to look like when you unclick it. Now, remember I said in an earlier slide, you can see, well, let me back up. You can see on the calculate tax, we've unclicked it. There's no FICA taken out. You go look over to the right, there's no state withholding taken out, but you see how the Medicare was still checked. Okay, again, This is the 2020 update. We updated this slide and look what happened. So remember to uncheck this box. I'm sure most of you have already updated your program to the 2020 CTAS update. And so make sure that you uncheck that box. Very, very important. You shouldn't have anything. On your taxes screen, it should be all 0 here. Now going on to the next screen, okay? Now for some reason, again, the para, you're in the employee deduction screen, and for John Johnson, and you see that the health plan is 0, the dental is 0, the para, John is participating in the para plan. Now, for some reason, the system, again, did not remove the percentage over there to the right, so make sure that you use that down arrow button and you 0 that out. So there's no para contribution. Election judges do not participate in para. Okay, so we're going to here's the screen. This is what it should look like when you unclick that. You see that? It's all 0. Health plan, dental plan, life plan, the para is zeroed out. All this is what you should be looking at. So in going to the next screen, the employer share, this should all be zeroed out. And then your account distribution. Now, this is your account distribution. We covered this earlier, where this is the general fund because they are employees of the township. The account number for elections is 41960. And these are part-time. So your object code is 103. And of course, it would be 100% of their wages. Okay, now moving on to the next screen here, I'm going to show you what this should look like. Okay, now you see there, when we first started out, there were some taxes taken out. So when you use the override system, you see that again, for 6 hours, we're paying John at $15 an hour, which is $90 gross pay. And if you take a look at the summary on the right-hand side, the $90 regular pay, the gross earnings, and the net pay is $90. And that's what the election judge payroll should look like. Okay, so there's no taxes taken out for John, and he will get a check for $90 for his election judge wages. Again, another little cartoon that we thought was cute. Funny. Override method only impacts this current payroll. So again, do not go into the employee card. Only you go to payroll, you're going to add a payroll, and you're going to title it election judge payroll. Only this current payroll that we're covering is going to be impacted. Only that. Now, the clerk has the election judge. Okay. Now, the clerk, the duties and responsibility of the clerk is the head election official. So if the clerk is participating as an election judge, is actually taking one of the roles at the election, either being the roster judge or the greeting judge, or, then that particular clerk is participating in being an election judge, is actually being a judge at the election. This is the coding that should be used. Again, the 100, now you see that the account number is different. The 41410 is for the clerk election wages. The 103 is, of course, she's part-time, unless your clerk is full-time, but part-time is the majority of the townships. There's no taxes taken out. Now remember, this is only a clerk that's participating, has an election judge. No taxes taken out, no conflict of interest that needs to be filled out. You use the override method for payment on his or her wages, and the mileage, you pay the clerk for the mileage. Again, 100, her account number is different than the one used for the election judge employees, because this is the clerk. The clerk has their own account number, 41410, and then of course mileage, 331. Now, you see on the lower right-hand side there, we have a little insert there. Now, if your clerk is facilitating and just acting as the head election official, that means your clerk is there at the primary, is there at the presidential election, and not participating in any of the roles, the roster roll, the greeting, or anything like that, and is just there as an overseer of the process. That particular pay then for that clerk goes under his or her regular pay. So you can withhold taxes, but that still goes under the clerk account number of 41410. Now I know that's a little confusing, and because I know that some clerks probably participate as an election judge, and maybe they have to because they're short election judges in their township, and that's understandable. But we just want to show you the difference in the pay. Okay, so if they're acting as election judges, actually performing as one of the roles, then no taxes are taken out. If the clerk is acting as the head election official, because that is part of the clerk's duties and responsibility as a clerk, then you pay under the regular pay for that clerk. And taxes are withheld, but it's still under the clerk's account number. So then the clerk couldn't go ahead and participate in para, because that clerk is actually fulfilling the duties of their responsibility as a clerk. So there again, we're just iterating the fact that the clerk, as a head election official, taxes and para can be withheld as it is part of their statutory duty. And only the election judge's activity is exempt. So clerks, if you've been participating just as the head election official, you can have taxes taken out and you can participate in para-retirement's plan. But if you are facilitating as an election judge and actually have a role at the election, whether it's a roster judge or a greeting judge or one of the other judges, the ballot judge, then you are exempt and you have no taxes taken out, and you do not participate in para during that time for that pay period. So what if I'm asked to withhold? What do I do then? Yes, you can withhold taxes. You can. And then you will want to send a W-2 at the end of the year. But keep in mind that as townships, we are not required to withhold taxes. But again, we do have some election judges that state, yes, I want you to please take taxes out, Petra, because it seems like I'm hit every year, so please take them out. You can do that. But again, I would ask them to give it to you in writing, because sometimes people change their minds, and when they do get their paycheck and taxes are taken out, it's, well, I really didn't want you to do that. So I would, and make sure that all the proper forms are filled out, all W-4s, state and federal, and all the forms that you need for your election judges. Very, very important. Now, other considerations. This again, election judges not working in any other capacity of the township. If your election judge is going to earn over $1,800 during the year, you must withhold FICA, Social Security from the first dollar. I know that's kind of confusing from what we've been showing you in the previous slides. So if you have an election judge that's going to earn over $1,800, then you have to withhold Social Security, okay? Now, if they earn over $600, which I'm sure the majority of the judges will be earning because of the elections this year, this being an election year, you must send a W-2 at the end of the year, okay? If they earn over 600. Now, just to let you know, in my township, I find it easier just to send all my election judges a W-2. Just makes it easier for me, and I let them make the decision whether they want to keep it or not, or file. It's entirely up to them. But never, ever, ever send an election judge a 1099, ever. Okay, so using this override method that we covered allows you to just have a single employee card, okay? Now, CTAS automatically fills in the blanks correctly, but if they make over $1,800 for the year, please keep in mind to withhold that FICA from $1. Very, very important. Okay. Now, it's important for you to not go ahead and go into the employee card though when you're doing this payroll. You are just strictly doing the payroll for election judges. This does not affect the permanent employee card of your employees. So, in conclusion, election judges are employees. There's no taxes taken out. There's separate checks for mileage or reimbursement. And the proper forms have to be filled out. Very, very important. And that's it.
Okay, Petra, we have quite a few questions in the queue. Are you ready to take questions?
Yes, I am.
Okay. We have a question from Maria. Maria is asking, I am a clerk treasurer appointed many years ago. Do I need to provide the C-6000 and resolution and affidavit as head election judge?
No. No, Maria, you do not. Because keeping in mind that even though you're appointed, this is part of your statutory duty. So you do not need to do the C-6000.
Okay.
Or the affidavit.
All right, we'll go on to the next question from Randy. Randy is asking, maybe we'll get to this, but isn't it easier to just issue 1099s and treat judges as independent contractors?
Okay, it probably would be easier, Randy, but that is not what the state identifies, okay? They are not independent contractors. They are employees of your township, okay? And they're employees because they are providing a service for your township. So they are not, according to the state law, they are not independent contractors. They are your employees. Independent contractors are not your employees, but these are your employees.
Okay, we have another question from Maria. Are training hours included with mileage reimbursement or with wages?
Okay, training hours should be included, but there again, okay, so training hours included with your mileage? No, they're not. The training hours should be part of the payroll. That should be payroll.
Okay, we got a question from Faye. Payment for training time for judges does not need a separate check, correct?
Payment for what? I'm sorry.
Payment for training time for judges does not need a separate check, correct?
Yes, it does. Okay, now, okay, so keeping in mind that the wage theft law states you have to pay your judges within 30 to 31 days. So when your judges say, when we had the training in February, I think it was, I had to cut a separate check for each supervisor or treasurer that attended that training. Because remember, you're not taking taxes out of that. So in addition to their regular payroll, these judges, these supervisors got 3 separate checks, one for mileage, one for election judge training, and one for the regular payroll. So it does have to be separate. Yes, it does.
Okay, we have a question from Diane. So for my supervisors, they will make over 1,800. They should have the taxes taken out, correct?
Yes, FICA. They need to have the FICA taken out, and you need to provide the C-6000, the resolution needs to be in place, and the affidavit for each time card.
Okay, we have a question from Susan. For an election judge earning over 1,800 a year to withhold FICA from first dollar, how do we determine if they will make greater than 1,800 for hours worked during the elections?
Okay, it's basically you just estimated. It's ballpark figure. If you have an election judge that you use all the time, okay, for all your primaries, you use it for all the elections. Maybe this person is the head judge. So then the person is probably going to go over 1,800. Now, the way you can bypass this is not to utilize that particular judge for all those hours, to maybe cut back a little bit. Okay, but it's kind of a ballpark figure. You have to just kind of estimate yourself.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Another question from Diane. On another note, what do we code our P&P reimbursement under?
Okay, I don't have that information right with me. Diane, you can certainly email me and I can give you that information.
Okay, we have a question from Deborah. What is the difference between the federal and state W-4?
If you take a look at the forms, you will see what the difference are. The important thing is, okay, some employees want state taxes taken out, and CTAS does not calculate state taxes. So this is something that the employee has to want taken out and actually put in there. You have to implement that manually, that they want state taxes taken out. As far as the forms, they have changed, so I would suggest that you look at them. I have not reviewed the new 2020 forms, but I know the W-4s are different. So please take a look at them. Okay, they both have to be filled out. Now, keeping in mind that, again, this is for the federal form should be filled out for the judges and stuff. You know, you need that information. But take a look at them because they have changed. They have changed.
Okay, we have a question from Valerie. Please clarify if a supervisor is filling a role as an election judge, you still take taxes out, correct?
No. No, if a supervisor is participating as an election judge, they are part of the election judge payroll and you use the override system. Okay, but you do need the C-6000 paperwork attached to that, the affidavit.
All right, we have a question from Kala. Is the 1,800 amount just for the judge hours or for a supervisor's normal hours and judge hours?
I believe that that is just for the judge hours. Why don't you email me after this and I can certainly check on that for you. I don't want to give you an incorrect answer. But I believe it could be combined or just for the judge hours. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I will get back to you.
Okay, we have a question from Tarina. I believe she is saying Minnesota W-4 just became required this year. If you look at the 2020 forms, you will see how different they are now. Minnesota uses exemptions, the federal one does not. Okay, so it's more of a comment from Tarina.
Okay.
Thank you for that comment, Tarina.
Okay.
Susan is asking, so I actually have to add everybody to my employees list.
What? I'm sorry, what was the question?
The question is, I actually have to add everybody to my employees list.
Yes.
Okay. We did get some comments and questions in the chat box. Let's see if I can sift through these. Taryn asked, are taxes withheld from the clerk's wages if acting in both capacities as head election judge and one of the other positions?
You know, that's a tough one because actually then I would say that taxes would not be taken out because if she's performing as an election judge, you know, the election judge has a clear defined role. I mean, they are in there either a ballot judge or a greeting judge or, you know, a roster judge. I mean, they have specific roles. So I would say no taxes would be taken out.
Okay. We got a question from Mary. Do you have to report election judges on the quarterly Minnesota unemployment report?
I would say yes. Now, I had to do it for the exempt employees at the end of the year. The para exclusion report was part of that. But I would say yes, you would have to. Yes.
Okay. We have a question from Richard. On the 30 to 31 day window for payment, when does the clock start?
Okay, the clock would start ticking from the day of the election. Okay, so say the election is held on the first Tuesday, you have your meeting like 2 weeks after that, 3 weeks after that. That's when you should pay your election judges. It should be within that 30 to 31 day window.
All right, we have another question from Mary. So if the clerk is the head election official for the day but fills in and is a ballot judge for 2 hours of that day, should she be separating those duties on the time card and they would be paid separately?
If she's only filling in for a couple of hours, I would not worry about that. I would have taxes taken out as her statutory duty as the head election official.
Okay, we got some clarification from Taryn from a previous question that Taryn submitted. For clarification, could you send everyone in attendance the information on how to deal with the 1,800 threshold related to supervisor as election judges?
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, regarding that, Petra, if you want to send me an email with clarification on this particular topic, I can email the attendees myself.
Sounds great.
Okay, those are all the questions in the Q&A box. To our attendees, we have about 10 minutes remaining in this live session. So if you have any further questions, please submit those now. We got one from Nancy. Shouldn't the 31 days start from when the work is performed?
Yes, so the work would be performed at the elections, or if they're attending training, it would begin from the day of that training. So yes, you're right.
Okay, we have a request from Deborah. Could you repeat the quarterly filings question? Do we include the judge's pay? Not sure which question that was. Let's see. Do you have to report election judges on the quarterly Minnesota unemployment report? That was the initial question.
Right. And I said, yes, you probably would have to.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I don't see any further questions in the Q&A box.
Okay.
All right, Petra, if you'd like to make a closing statement, please do, and then I'll make my closing statement and we'll officially close out today's live session.
Okay, sounds good. I want to thank everyone for calling in and participating. I know this can be a bit confusing. Feel free to email me. And again, if it's something that you feel the other participants would benefit, I can certainly send it to Joseph and he can send it out to the group. Thank you, and all of you. We miss you. We miss seeing the face-to-face, but I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thanks for participating.
Okay, thank you, Petra, for your presentation. And to our attendees, certificates of participation will be emailed to you directly after today's webinar closes. Additionally, once Petra sends me the additional information requested, I will email all of the attendees on today's program with a personal email containing that information. Thanks again for your participation. Everybody have a safe and wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.